please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
100 points higher on the Sensex, 25 points higher on the Nifty, 10,800 is where we have the Nifty openings.
For big returns to be made, Indian elections have to get over. US should stop increasing interest rates. US should stop quantitative tightening.
India's debt to GDP should further drive consumption.
Overpromise and underdeliver. That has been the story of NBCC over the last few quarters, and the result is that the stock is now trading at its 52-week low.
The capital cycle, investment cycle is just starting. I think you have the flow of local money into markets. I think it's just the beginning.
A yo-yo kind of day, but really going nowhere. 10,768, 3-4 point change.
ITC and Axis Bank, they were down. Maruti was a bit soft, down about 1%. Mahindra and Mahindra were down about 2.5%.
Dalal Street ends lower after a range-bound session. The Sensex has shed 115 points. The Nifty raises minor gains in the last 1 hour. Mid-caps outperform large caps.
Big bull Rakesh Jhunjhunwala expects 2018 to be a year of consolidation. Bets on domestic flows in Indian equities outpacing foreign inflows.
Crucial OPEC meeting in Vienna enters the second day. Crude oil prices are down 2% as crude exporters are expected to increase production.
India might face duties up to 500% on export of big diameter welded pipes. US Commerce Department claims these pipes are extremely subsidized. Shares of Jindal Saw, Welspun, Maharashtra Seamless tumble in trade.
Indigo rallies after the company clarifies their top management did not receive any summons for FEMA violations. We had CG Power, which also surged on the back of a couple of upgrades. Citi, Kotak both upgrading the rating. On the other hand, we had Avanti Feeds, Reliance Infrastructure, Bharat Forge, which ended the day around 4% in the red. Okay, those were the top 5 headlines which really defined the day's trading action, a day which was very tepid. Hello and welcome to a fresh new edition of Markets Today Talk Back, the show where we tell you about 8 hours of trading action through just 5 stories. I'm Prashant Nair. With me is Surabhi Upadhyay. Surabhi, hi.
Hi, Prashant. Well, yes, we have 30 minutes to go over everything that happened and also discuss, of course, some of the queries that our viewers are sending in. Our experts are joining in to answer all of those questions. Today, we have Angel Broking's Mayuresh Joshi, as well as technical expert Mitesh Thakkar joining in to answer all of those queries. Good evening, gentlemen. Before we start off, let's just quickly rewind back and sum up what the day was like. Prashant, today, once again, absolutely range-bound. It felt like dead heat, like nothing is moving in this market. I think the missing component for any market movement were tweets, Trump tweets, which were hard to come by. Actually, no. I mean, there were lots of tweets, none related to trade. I guess that was the missing element. So, I mean, just look at the last two. Forget about, Asian trade. I mean, day before was really red all over. Yesterday was, we saw recovery. But two US sessions, the last two US sessions, which is what we wake up to, have been absolutely flat. Nothing to really take away. Markets haven't sold off, but I mean, it's not as if they've really moved. So, it's basically almost replicating what's been happening in overnight sessions. So, so most markets in Asia were lower today. Except maybe the Japanese market, which was a little higher. If you look at markets which lost, India lost the least. That's been a theme which has been emerging now for the last so many days. When everything is down in the region, India is also down, but it is down a lot less. Here in India, after the initial sell-off, the market gapped up essentially right at open, but that was the high. And then the market tumbled straight away and it continued to fall, but it didn't become a trending day. We had we have oil, which is going to be a big determinant. You saw what happened in the last hour of trade. Oil prices, global oil prices started to fall, registering a 1.5–2% cut. And here you had oil stocks like oil marketing companies, which rose the ranks to be the top big gainers as far as the indices are concerned. I'm talking about IOC, HP, BP, etc. And of course, on the other side, we had PSU banks, real estate, metals, pharmaceuticals, which were some of the top losers. Each of these sectoral indices lost over 1% in trade. But stocks, Surabhi. Okay, so let's quickly run through the list. Pretty much elaborates the point that Prashant is making. If you're talking about the big Nifty losers today, then a couple of names from the auto pack stood out, Mahindra and Mahindra being one of them. That stock was down almost 2%. We had continued weakness on Titan, 2.5% down on that stock. And there was some selling in pharma. Dr. Reddy's being case in point in the large cap universe.
Banks were a fairly mixed trend today. Generally speaking, PSUs were not the flavor. SBI was down almost 2%. Some of the private sector names like Kotak and Yes, they were also on the lower side. But it was really the day of ICICI Bank once again. It was the Lone Ranger. Up almost 1.5%. Reliance is the other stock that really kept batting for the bulls. It continued to make fresh highs. So that's a stock that was on the upside. Crude, as Prashant has already mentioned, IOC, BPCL and HPCL, some very dramatic moves towards the last half an hour of trade, taking those gains almost 3 to 4% on the upside. If I talk about pharma, aside of Dr. Reddy's in the large cap space, a lot of the mid cap pharma companies were also under pressure. So Divi's, Strides Shasun, even Glenmark Pharma was off the highs. Wockhardt managed a 3.5% cut for itself. Coming down to some of the mid cap movers and shakers, we've already highlighted some of the stocks in the headlines. Bharat Forge really stood out with that weakness. NCC and sugar was an extremely weak space today. Dwarikesh, Balrampur, Dhampur. We're talking deep cuts between 6% to almost 10-11%. Last but not the least, where were the buyers gravitating to? Mid-cap IT, select mid-cap IT trades. First Source was a good name. Hexaware found some traction. Memphis's, by the way, was very strong. Interglobe Aviation was back in green. And VIP Industries, the luggage maker, another 52-week high on that stock today.
Okay, so on that note, let's just find some opinion on the charts and very near term. Mitesh Thakkar and Mayuresh Joshi are with us. They're going to take your questions as well, so keep them coming in. But just to set it up, Mitesh, what would you make of the day today, and how would you approach coming back tomorrow?
Yeah. So good evening, Prashant. I think in the closing session we were looking at what's been the Nifty movement for the last 3 days, and practically it's been 10,700 on the downside to about 10,800, 820 on the upside. I think this range might sustain or remain in force given the fact that most of the trend indicators are still flat. I would worry if we start breaking below 10,700, 680 zones, then I think we might be setting up for a mild correction. A test of 10,550 levels could happen. But yes, I think for the time being, it looks like it will be a choppy range for the next 2 to 3 sessions.
All right. Okay, gentlemen, let's move to the second headline that comes from our big interview of the day. Big Bull Rakesh Jhunjhunwala is betting on domestic flows in the Indian equity market, outpacing foreign flows. In an exclusive interaction with Shireen Bhan, Jhunjhunwala said that he is quite bullish on troubled banks and that BJP will form the government in 2019. Here's an excerpt from the interview.
What is the mood in the market with respect to what is happening on the politics front?
See, I don't know what's the mood in the market. I know what I feel. I personally feel it is too early to predict an election, which is going to take place 11 months hence, right? And see, it's in the history of all democracies, bipolls by and large always go against the ruling party. So I think too much is being made of the fact that the BJP has lost the bipolls. The fact remains that Mr. Modi is the most towering leader this country has today. And I think in a range of 1 to 10, if he is 9, the second person is 3. So you will fight these central elections on the basis of an electable prime minister. I don't think the Congress or the opposition has got a credible leader as a prime minister. Having said that, the fact is that the BJP did extremely well in the Hindi cow belt. To repeat that kind of performance may be difficult. But I am pretty sure myself, in all my calculations, that the next government is going to be a BJP government. It's not going to be a Khichdi government.
Let's talk about the sectors that look promising to you today. And let me start by asking you about what has been a consistent bet for you, and that is pharma. We've seen a revival as far as the pharma index is concerned. It's up, about 15%, but still off its lows, off its highs. Do you believe that the worst is behind us when it comes to pharma? Does this sector now inspire confidence?
I'm pretty sure the worst is behind us. See, the problem was the US generic competition. The fact that there were all kind of threats that the government imposed price control in India, and 3 was the currency. Right? If you see 18 over 16, 17, everybody's realization foreign currency was 4-5% lower than what it was in the previous year. This year it will be 5% higher than what it was last year. I think the generic competition in America is leveling off now. And now I think the Indian pharma industry is entering an unknown, risky but exciting phase, where companies like Sun, Lupin and others are going into specialty generics. Right? Even if one of the medicines succeeds, it could be a game changer.
Would this be a sector then that you would, again, like pharma, look at with renewed confidence?
Absolutely. I'm extremely bullish on banks, especially those who are in trouble.
Including ICICI Bank?
Absolutely. ICICI Bank carries a lot of the characteristics of HDFC Bank. Their CASAs, their retail. It's the legacy which is the problem. That legacy, believe me, is going to get over in 1819. Don't expect anything in 1819, whatever these chairmen and directors and analysts tell you. 1819 is also a year of provisions. But there will be growth in profitability. And 1920 will be an absolute clean year. When 9 out of 10 banks will come back to normalized provisions in the private sector. I don't know about the public sector. So ROE and ROA of other banks will go up and slowly growth will also come. So I'm not saying it will be 5 times book, but surely I think good banks will be 2.5, 3 times book.
Okay, I mean, so that last part is where Rakesh is saying that he's bullish on troubled private sector banks. He doesn't have a view on what public sector banks will look like. But and this is not an 18-19, which is the financial year that we're in, but essentially 19-20, next financial year, when there'll be a fair bit of provision. I mean, we'll start to see provision right back, etc. this year, and we'd get to normalize provisions next year. And of course, Shireen made that point about ICICI Bank in particular, and he made a comparison with HDFC Bank. Mayuresh, our next question is on ICICI Bank. So this is coming your way. Our viewer Jayesh has sent us this question. He's got 1,900 shares of ICICI. His purchase price is 300 rupees. 300, by the way, is the day high today. He's been holding them for the last 1.5 years and is a long-term investor. His question is, should he hold or sell? I think if you were to put that question to Rakesh, I think you would say you'd probably advise Jayesh to hold. But Mayuresh, what would you say?
I would concur, I think, Prashant. I think it's a hold from our side as well. What has actually transpired in terms of what might happen in terms of leadership changes and the board recomposition, I think that is one positive step ahead. Second, I think the core balance sheet dynamics itself are showing a huge shift. Retail advances have grown significantly. Even out of fee income, retail constitutes almost 75%. The recognition that they've done, that can continue in Q1, Q2 because NCLT-related cases will still have provisioning needed to be done. But apart from the mandatory provisioning, I think the overall return ratio should start improving and credit costs should start dwindling down. So I think the second half is where you should probably see recovery. Credit growth has probably held up and valuations are probably looking very, very attractive at this point of time. So it's been a painful period for the investor for the past 1 year, but I see no doubt over the next few quarters significant earnings improvement resulting in significant improvements in ROEs and ROEs. So clear hold from my side.
Okay, that's ICICI Bank. Let's move to the next headline. The biannual OPEC meeting in Vienna entered its second day today. Both Brent crude and of course NYMEX were almost 2% lower in intraday action. Crude exporters are widely expected to increase production at the end of this meeting. In fact, the group might agree to pump more oil, possibly supported by some other producers outside OPEC, which may include Russia. Manisha Gupta is here with the details. Manisha, of course, Indian equities will be extremely happy if there's more oil being pumped into global markets.
Well, the OPEC meeting has begun today. Today has been the interministerial monetary meeting, and tomorrow it would be a proper OPEC members meeting. And on Saturday, you would have the OPEC and the allies sitting together as well, basically to discuss about on whether or not there is going to be an increase in supply. Remember, Russia and Saudi Arabia have been pushing for an increase in supply, anywhere between 500,000 to 1.5 million barrels per day. That, of course, would come in the fact that the OPEC compliance right now is at around 150%. So even when you fix up that quota, you perhaps would be looking at 3 lakh to 5 lakh barrels of an increase in the daily production. While the other countries have not been on board, the reason that the crude oil prices have declined today is because there have been positive statements coming in from Iran that a modest increase in supply is something that they can compromise with. That is what has led the crude oil prices to decline. While we have seen statements come in from the OPEC meetings as of now, but it really would be the final decision of the number, of the quantum and the timeline on what kind of supply and etc. we are looking at is what would give you direction in case of prices. If it is just 3 to 5 lakhs, then you perhaps wouldn't see any impact on prices. 500,000 to 1 million barrels per day might lead to crude oil prices declining by a couple of dollars. But if it is anything more than 1 million barrels, then we are perhaps looking at very sharp weakening or decline in case of crude oil prices.
Okay, I mean, till the final decision comes, I think, which will be like sometime very early Saturday morning, you'd get lots of statements from members, and oil prices do move, as we've seen in previous meetings as well, sometimes quite violently. We've got a question on ONGC.
Mahesh Hariharan has got 7,000 shares of ONGC. His purchase price is 191. ONGC is right now at about 160. So he's down. He's been holding the stock now for the last 2 years, wants to know what he should do, hold or sell. Mitesh, what would you tell him? And also, if you have a view independently on oil, if you track it.
Yeah, I do track oil, but I'll start with ONGC first. See, I think, very clearly, this is a trading stock. It's not showing any signs of long-term movement on the upside. So my sense that it's a stock which will do 140 to about 195, 200 broadly. That's where the stock typically peaks out. And therefore, I think next time it gets close to about 185, 190, he should look at exiting and possibly getting into a Reliance or possibly some of the pharma stocks, which in my belief for the next 12 to 18 months could be a good income creator. So I think all these stocks will give you about 25-30% upside if you take a 12 to 15 month kind of horizon. So I think switching is good, but not at these levels, obviously, because it's down much and the stock isn't showing any signs of any directional movement on the longer term charts.
Okay, all right, gentlemen, we'll take a quick break on that note, but do stay tuned because we have our experts answering more of your questions on the other side. Welcome back. You're still with us on Markets Today Talk Back. We are in conversation with Mayuresh Joshi as well as Mitesh Thakkar. They're taking your questions right here. Well, let's move to the next headline. India might face duties of up to 500% on export of big diameter welded pipes. In a preliminary report by the US Commerce Department, the US has found that these pipes were extremely subsidized, at least that's their allegation, that they were extremely subsidized by India. Hence the up move in tariffs. Now, this development affected stocks like Maharashtra Seamless, Jindal Saw and Welspun Corp. Many of them were down between 2 and 5%. Milan Mehta is calling us from Gujarat. I believe he has a question on one of these companies. In fact, Jindal Saw. He has, I think, 200 shares. Let's find out more. Milan, what's your question? बताइए, सवाल आपका?
Hello.
हाँ, बताइए क्या सवाल है?
मेरे सर के लिए मेरा सवाल है
जी
मैं जिंदल सो 5 साल से होल्ड कर रहा हूँ 39.50 पैसे से अभी बहुत नीचे आ गया भाव उनका अभी 165 जाके अभी 80-90 में आ गया फिर
जी हाँ काफ़ी स्टॉक प्राइस में करेक्शन आया है तो आपको एक व्यू देते हैं इस पर Mitesh, question is directed at you. Obviously, he's seeing a lot of that wealth erode. He's been a long time investor. What should he do?
Surabhi, I think he asked for Mayuresh's opinion.
Okay.
Fundamental.
I was going to get fundamentals anyway, but since I'm asking you, I mean, any view on some of these pipe stocks?
Yeah. So I think the stock, as you rightly said, has been declining a lot, and I think the longer term support's kicking around 80 to 75 zones, which is where the stock has started the entire rally in the month of June 2017. So if you can take more pain, I think there's still about 10-12 points of pain left in the stock, and then should bottom out. It may not give him a big rally from there, but I think a trading bounce back to about 97 to 102 could happen on the upside, which could be a better exit point than what we have right now.
Mayuresh, do you have a view?
Oh, Prashant, yes, and I'll take the liberty of answering this in Hindi.
Please, please.
तो आपका जो स्टॉक है आई थिंक ऊपर के स्तरों से डेफिनेटली नीचे आ चुका है और कहीं ना कहीं आई थिंक ये जो यूएस सैंक्शंस है एक सेंटिमेंटल नेगेटिव न्यूज़ है काफ़ी पाइप मेकर्स के लिए क्योंकि अगर ये न्यू ड्यूटी इम्पोज होती है तो कहीं ना कहीं आई थिंक ये पाइप्स को आई थिंक जाना पड़ेगा इधर अदर एक्सपोर्ट मार्केट्स या डोमेस्टिक मार्केट्स के लिए इसलिए जो वॉल्यूम्स में एक जो हमने बढ़ोतरी देखी थी वहाँ पे शायद एक ब्रेक लग सकता है और कहीं ना कहीं रियलाइजेशंस और बॉटम लाइन पे इम्पैक्ट आ सकता है बट कहीं ना कहीं इवन विद दिस न्यूज़ आई थिंक उसकी एक छोटी सी सब्सिडरी यूएस में भी है तो आई थिंक जितना इम्पैक्ट हमने स्टॉक प्राइस पे आज देखा है वो मेरे ओपिनियन में सेंटिमेंटल है क्योंकि आपकी बाइंग नीचे है मैं बिल्कुल कंकर करता हूँ मितेश से शायद थोड़ा सेंटिमेंटल नेगेटिव पुश थ्रू स्टॉक प्राइस में देखने मिले बट आप पेशेंस रखिए होल्ड करिए स्टॉक को आई थिंक लॉन्गर पीरियड में अर्निंग जरूरत काफ़ी अच्छी होनी चाहिए
Okay, thanks very much, both of you, for that view on Jindal. Well, we move on to the last story of the day, and basically let's take a look at some of the stocks which actually moved around both higher and lower. Amongst gainers today, we had names like Indigo, which basically cut its losses from yesterday in half. And this after the company clarified that the top management has not received any summons from FEMA, for FEMA violation from the ED, that's the Enforcement Directorate. CG Power was the other name which surged about 3%. It was higher by more earlier, but lost some of that gain along with the market. We got some bullish commentary coming from Citi as well as Kotak. 1% beverages, which has essentially been on a losing streak now for days, was, I think, by the end of the day up on a daily circuit, 5% higher, 142. It's fallen from the highs of 450, 460, come a long way, and it broke that losing streak. The company, of course, announced that it's going to be declaring results on the 27th. On the losing end, we had stocks like Avanti Feeds, Reliance Infrastructure, and Bharat Forge, which were up around 4%, which were down about 4% each in trade today. We've got a question coming in as well, and this is the last question of the day. Manoj Gupta is writing in. He's got 500 shares of CG Power. He's paid 66 rupees each for them. He's been holding the shares for the last 2 years, and he wants to know whether he should hold or sell. He's a long-term investor. So, Mayuresh, briefly, if you can advise Manoj in terms of what he should do, CG Power.
So they reported, Prashant, an exceptional loss of 414 odd crores for the quarter gone by, and the bottom line got hit significantly. But when I was looking at the 10-year financial performance, I think nothing has probably moved significantly higher. If you look at the top line, I think the top line has been quite sluggish. If you look at their fixed turnover ratios as well, the asset turns have been quite constrained in the range. What you're probably looking at even in terms of return ratios because of weak cash flows, I think both ROEs and the EPS has not shown any significant growth. So in my opinion, again, I think there are better stocks to probably look at. Aditya Birla Capital is something that we probably like at this point of time, both in terms of their NBFC, housing finance, AMC, and the life insurance doing well. So even if one assumes significantly lower valuations compared to its peers, there is still significant upside potential. So I would probably recommend a switch on rallies to Aditya Birla Capital.
Okay. All right, gentlemen. We'll wrap it up then on that note. Thanks very much for being with us and taking all the viewer queries. That's a wrap on this evening's edition of Markets Today. Prashant and I will take your leave and see you with the markets bright and early tomorrow.